Good evening. Welcome. This is the After Hours show. I'm Joe in Norway. In the midst of harvest time, I'm joined by Ann Lee, a retired college professor and a community member at the Daily Coast. She is a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Ann.
Hey Joe, how's it going? Looks like something's happening in the outdoor kitchen.
Oh yeah, we're definitely outdoors again. Uh, it's a bit of struggle cooking in the middle of the evening. Uh, it's also a struggle to, well, let's just say I really enjoy my outdoor kitchen because I don't have to clean up the mess that I got in the inside door kitchen. So this is perfect. Except we're battling torrential rains. So there was so much rain today, I barely had time to harvest the red currants we're going to be eating or making. Sorry.
Looks like you got a
I've been
fair
eating.
amount though.
Yeah, I think I've got about 3 kilos or so.
Nice.
I'm up in the control room at the moment. So before I go and explain everything down there, I thought I
Well,
would. Yes.
I'll vamp till ready.
I just wanted to cover a few things here. Let me see if I can get the screen share. Um, yeah, this one. How we look here. Yeah, just a little update on the genocide in Gaza.
Oh, yeah.
Just hundreds killed, at least over 150, 200 some odd people killed all this week. Hundreds wounded. It just is ongoing. It's just they're unspeakable. Continues unabated. One positive thing is that the many Palestinian factions signed I don't know if it's a reconciliation agreement. Basically, they're agreeing to work together. What they agreed on will take hold after the genocide. So it leaves it's a bit vague. So considering who knows how long
Is that
this ongoing thing will happen, but at least
is that
there's
the
some
same
unity
agree
about they're going to form a unity government for both the West Bank and Gaza together. So there will not be a separation like the Hamas and
that
Fatah.
was an agreement between Hamas and Fatah, right?
Well, many, I can't remember,
Oh,
like
oh,
17
I
or
see. Okay.
more factions. So these are like, it's
Oh,
pan-factional.
the lesser faction.
Yeah, so many were included, and this was hosted in Beijing by the Chinese. So that's a somewhat positive thing to hear. And then we've got potential next president of the United States denouncing the catastrophic levels of food insecurity in Gaza, calls for permanent ceasefire. In a pivot from Biden, we shall see what she said. There was how she she put a caveat when she discussed with where was it? Um, she said that I've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters. So this little caveat here has not been said by previous presidents. No Republican would say it. It's not much to go on, but how Israel behaves in response will be taken into account is essentially what that sentence now reads. So perhaps there'll be some change of policy with if she gets in.
There was a piece that mentioned that her foreign policy, she's not going to keep Biden's foreign policy people, at least at the top.
Yeah, I've heard most of the dissent was coming from her side of the White House. Um, let's just hope her parents push her a little bit and remind her of her roots.
Indeed, indeed.
Okay, so it'll take me a minute or so to get down to the to my other office. So I'm gonna take it away. Yeah.
Well, it was a busy week, and the I think what we saw was a lot of silence in a way from Trump himself. I think Trump is laying low, partially because there's a bunch of other things that take up people's attention. The Olympics started today, complete with its own bit of issues. There was a line failures on the major high-speed trains in France. Somebody had sabotaged whatever some arson attacks on relay stations. On I think it's the TGV, but you know, not quite sure. I haven't followed up on it, but it is clear that there's some issues in transportation on the first day of the Olympics. And as usual, it has all the other things. The suggestion that it might be Russian sabotage is, I think, also an interesting issue. Russia has already threatened it, so that it's not like it's a complete surprise. And of course, that follows on Russian sabotage in more in munitions plants in a wide variety of places like Spain or Germany, etc. There are these little strange fires that break out at some factories, etc. That does resemble the the smoking problem at Russian various Russian factories, and also the exploding relay stations in or the fiery relay stations in on various Russian train lines. So that's kind of what's going on. There's a lot of trying to sort of reduce things like warfare during the Olympics, and it's unclear whether that's going to happen. I don't. No truce has been declared, certainly, but and if you're paying attention to the Olympics, there are various contingents have fewer people, and there's all the other things that are about approximately 70,000 troops have been called up to protect Paris. So stuff's happening.
Oh, and
Yeah.
it's going to
Yes,
take a
Joe.
while tonight, so you can go as slow and
Yeah.
as patient as you need to. We
Okay.
got a little bit of a pause before after I get things going here.
Okie dokie.
So, so it's 1 month early for currants. Well, most berries. I've got a load of red currants here. Here's my camera there.
Yum.
So I thought we'd this is the traditional. They call it a juice cooker in Norway, but it's essentially a kind of donut. Oh, a moth in there. Get out of there. essentially it lets the steam up through the middle in that cone. We set it over on this boiling pot of water. We put the strainer basket of berries. I'll put one layer of berries, a layer of our other ingredient here, the meadowsweet or meadwort seeds. These are a little almondy taste. They were used in the way back in the day for mead making, but they add an almondy flavor. The young seeds, or the unripe seeds. So we'll throw this in there to give it a more mellow taste to the super tartness of the currants, and a little bit of sugar, and steam it for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, just depending on how long it breaks down. We don't touch it in that period. It'll start to, the juice will fill up and then start to run into our little tube here. The tube. And then I've got a few sterilized jars that we'll just drain into. And then we've got our syrup that we could, it's cordial basically. Use it for drinks. A lot of vitamin C, a lot of tastiness, very sour. So I'm not sure how much sugar I'm going to use, but the kids tell me not to use too much. But my partner can't deal with the tartness so much, so we got to work something out. Hopefully, the meadowsweet will kind of take that kick from the berry off, so it makes it more mellow. But I'll get this going, and it's all yours. If anybody has any questions about the process, you can ask me. Just
okay.
Just raise your hand or something.
Well, it could brew other things that way too, right? No, I'm just trying to. I have become interested in the idea of stovetop stills.
Oh.
For a while. That seemed interesting to me, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to commit to it, but it seems like an interesting idea. That they make these kind of still things you can sort of refine liquors of one kind or another on top of your stove. And as long as, you're making it for personal use, of course, there's no real issue.
And there's no,
anyway.
and there's no, what's the law that the anti-alcohol ban in the early 1900s? Prohibition, no prohibition.
Oh yeah. There's a certain amount that you can have relative to personal use or whatever. Medicinal, medicinal alcohol, which I always found amusing, considering the model for legalizing marijuana was first based, of course, on medicinal. Is still based on a kind of medicinal argument, which
my great grandparents got in a little bit of trouble when they were brewing their own upstairs in the attic in the winter in a Midwestern city. And their roof was the only one that didn't have any snow on it.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, as I said, it's been a long and busy week with the usual sort of conspiracy theories and other background stories. There wasn't a bump for the Trump the Trump nomination and choice of J.D. Vance as the vice presidential candidate, and needless to say, that's been an issue, and in fact, a little bit of disruption within the Republicans for that J.D. Vance might be a bit of a problem for the Republicans, considering that he decided to withdraw. And needless to say, the mainstream media has commented primarily that it was noble and gracious and all of those kinds of things, and you could sort of tell that. Well, go ahead.
He didn't. J.D. Vance withdrew.
No. I was talking about Biden with
Biden.
withdrawing. Yeah, that took the sales out of any kind of bump they were going to get from choosing J.D. Vance, and of course J.D. Vance has sort of come off as a kind of a dunce in terms of trying to do speeches and stuff. On the one hand, he's trying to appeal to the Trumpian base, but the people kept on dragging out other things that he'd said in public that were pretty either controversial relative to reproductive rights or just really extreme sort of or strange sort of things. The idea that abused women should stay with their husbands. Single people are a problem of some kind, that they have a lesser stake in American democracy, which makes little to no sense. But there is a kind of model that of family values, sort of extreme family values, that Vance is at least parroting. There are other issues about Vance that seem either not to be vetted, or that Trump is listening to donors and advisors who are in favor of Vance, and Vance always adjusts his ideological tone to whoever he's talking in front of. So the one speech from, was it 2017 or so, or 2019, that he did in front of a right-wing group, he was clearly pivoting it towards a certain brand of family value that I don't think he expected it to. This was before he ran for Senate, so it clearly some other issue was at work going on there, and it's mainly about money or support. That has been the kind of undercurrent, and then of course there's the surge of financial support and I think a kind of enthusiasm or excitement or whatever that some people like to measure. It's a problem. I would never. I don't think it's a good measure because it is so weird. That people are much more interested or excited about the Kamala Harris candidacy. And then, of course, all the usual arguments against either women or people of color in high office. They just all keep, sort of creeping, as it were, out into the open. And a lot of them are just trial balloons to see how far they can go with racist, BS. And it's quite weird to see some of those things pop up. For those of us who are older, it does harken back to the 60s or 70s, the same kind of discourse that you think you can get away with, or that some white folks think they can get away with in public discourse, that are clearly not so acceptable these days. And so that's kind of out there. And but the good thing is, of course, that there's a trending upwards, and the Democrats decided to choose a variety of virtual methods in order to do voting and stuff. They're following, party procedures in order to move the thing forward. They made the adjustments for a more virtual version of it, but also one that is not so susceptible to mischief. Let's put it that way. That can happen in any kind of process. This one seems to be open, and it is a kind of, as it were, it's a kind of bulldozing.
Forgot the seasoning,
really
and I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sorry. Carry on.
No MSG.
We'll
no
watch
MSG.
the pot.
Is my mic on? Or...
Yeah, your mic's on.
Yeah. No MSG, but a little bit of salt will just kind of...
dash of salt.
Needs some salt.
All right. There we go.
Show you the steam, so they get start to
boil
get opaque,
away.
And then you don't touch them. You just let them get hot enough until they explode, and then the juice goes out. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I think more or less the pectin level in the berry makes it uh, harder for the liquid to get out if you mash them early.
Yes.
Oh,
Is this process good for all kinds of berries?
yeah, and apples, pears, apricots. Um, it's a easy way to do jams, I guess, as well. I haven't done it in there,
Mhm.
but easy way to break them down real quick. Um,
Nice.
Popular mix here is wild red raspberries, blueberry, and blackberries when they come in season. I've never
Yum.
seen I haven't seen blackberries in the wild here, so I think they're more on the eastern part of the country.
I read a thing on strawberries, and for some reason, there's just not that they're unhealthy for you, but they're very, very difficult in terms of absorbing pesticides or whatever.
Oh,
So
they're champions at it, you mean?
yes, they're quite
Oh,
good at
wonderful.
absorbing pesticides, and that's really problematic. I'm not sure
I
how
was
you
taking a
absorb,
hike the other day, and we came across loads of meadwort, which are forest strawberries. They're tiny, like half the size of your little pinky nail.
Yes, I've seen those. Yes,
So
absolutely.
lovely. Concentrated strawberry flavor.
So I'm generally staying away from supermarket strawberries for a while. But
I would imagine there's some labor issues around the
I'm
strawberry.
sure strawberry picking and processing. There's some issue that they just don't. You can't evacuate certain pesticides from them. I'm sure it has something to do with the seeds or something, whatever. Anyway, not that I have any expertise in it. Although I recently went to a Trader Joe's, and I was just struck by how different the variety is than my regular supermarket. I mean, I hadn't been for a very long time, and so I went in there and I went, "Oh my gosh, there's all this other stuff that I'm not even near when I go to a supermarket," and it was a little frightening. Um, just because there are just certain things that just aren't carried in my local supermarket for I don't know what reason. I think that there's actually a market for it, but just have chosen not to do that. And you can see that in the sort of food distribution system that your tastes become a little bit more homogenized, whatever. So, anyway, that aside,
when I was in the States, I would if I couldn't find a natural food store, I'd go to Trader Joe's if there was one around to pick up California dried apricots, the unsulfured apricots that are cut in half,
yes,
unlike the Turkish style where they're whole. When they're cut in half and they're unsulfured, they are so fantastic. Just the best texture.
Yes, they are good.
Best flavor.
They seem not to be carrying them I was looking for them in Trader Joe's. They didn't have them, so I had to stick with the one that I suppose is comfort food to me, but sulfur dioxide is probably not a good thing to eat. So, but I actually do like the slab type apricots as opposed to these Turkish version of apricots.
The Turkish ones are too sweet.
Yes, agreed.
When they're dried, the sugars don't get that exposure they need to bring out the tartness.
Yes. and the price of everything has gone up. I would assert that we're generally in this bad period of price inflation, and far be it for me to accuse the food distribution system as being as price gouging, but there's a lot of variation. Let's just put it that way. This is going to be for a while, and see how the seasonal changes alter that.
Seasonal change. Can you see my breath?
Nah.
I can. It's hard.
It has it gets into the 60s at night here, but it is just it's not cool enough for me here, but it's the humidity anyway. Otherwise, the nation is sort of calmed down a little bit. I'm going to assume that we're going to have cataclysmic events of one kind or another. Recently, this past week, and my own analysis or suspicions were borne out when the head of the FBI proclaimed that they were unsure that any bullet at all had contacted ex-President Trump in the ear, that his injuries were the result of some sort of shrapnel, plastic shrapnel, as opposed to the bullet itself.
Did you
we have the
say
image of the one
ex-president?
bullet.
Did you say ex-president?
Yes, the former president.
Oh, I see where you stand. I see where you stand. Okay, just checking.
Mango Mussolini. Yes, indeed. God, the Orange Menace. They showed the bullet flying past, but that bullet was a different bullet. Let's just put it that way. The assassin managed to squeeze off anywhere from 3 to 4 shots initially. Those were the closest of any of them. The rest were just spray and pray. And of course, the seventh shot that rang out, the people are doing online analysis of the acoustics. So the counter sniper, and there's alternative conspiracy theories about second shooters and other kinds of stupidity, which didn't really get cleared up in the congressional hearings with the FBI director. But the fact that the FBI director was skeptical about whether a bullet had come in contact with Trump's ear was, I think, useful, because I think their analysis has come down to they've tracked each shot, and as I suggested after we'd done a lot of yammering online, is that the teleprompter shield reflector got hit, and several people got hit with a plastic or a glass polycarbonate shrapnel. So we'll hear it in the final report. Problem, of course, is that the head of the Secret Service resigned after being put under a really kind of terrible partisan scrutiny in the House Oversight Committee. I mean, they were just swearing at her. It was just pretty pathetic, actually. The usual suspects: Nancy Mace, a bunch of other, the variety of questioning, which is to make a certain type of assertion. A sort of declarative assertion that it's hard for you to either agree or disagree with, and you have to sort of figure out a rhetorical way to answer it but not answer it, and which is the sort of standard procedure for members of the cabinet. I was listening to Janet Yellen do exactly the same thing when she was interviewed by Congress. It's just amazing to see how, well, you have to have a certain way you can answer the question, and that you don't give up, whatever your position is, by agreeing with the largely idiotic assertion being made by the member of Congress. It's really, with all respect, if you listen to enough of these things, you realize that it's really showboating, and a lot of it is just not very productive, I guess. I recognize that it's still a legislative process, and much work is not done in these kinds of public hearings. And in fact, there's hard work that's being done. but it's not being done in front of the camera in that particular context. There's so much is left out of those things. You know, I'm sure there was a cordial conversation between former President Trump and Vladimir Zelensky, but no one has a report of whatever went on or a transcript of whatever went on in their conversation. And I'm sure that nobody brought up the prior attempt by Trump to extort Zelensky that resulted in the first impeachment. And in fact, we don't talk about that quite so much, which is actually fairly important. Those kinds of things are coming up, and there's been a deflection in the last week or so between the Project 2025 stuff, the fact that it's supported by the Heritage Foundation and a variety of other stuff, and it has all kinds of really it's a wish list for right-wing conservative policy procedures that will essentially take people's rights away at a federal level, or at least deflect some of that policy making down to the state level. And so you're going to have these kind of strange discrepancies. And recently there was more attempts to try and track down. J.D. Vance, agreed I think in an interview this past week that it was appropriate to keep track of women's menstrual cycles, that the state should have that information. Which of course, is getting around to Handmaid's Tale sort of stuff. And it's quite fascinating, I suppose, that anyone would sort of blurt that out as an actual policy that they would agree with, and that, and it's that kind of doubling down and not moderating position, which is an interesting thing. The Wall Street Journal suggested that Kamala Harris pick a more centrist person as her running mate. And that's kind of where some of the discourse is sort of pivoting. There are plenty of alternatives, a full range of folks, some of whom have withdrawn or at least suggested they really shouldn't be approached. That is, I'm sure they might change if they were actually confronted with it. Gretchen Whitmer, for example. Who else? Cedric Richmond. There's a variety of folks who Wes Moore said he's got enough to do in Maryland, for example. So these certain governors, really, they've only just started. And so it's kind of problematic. And then you, of course, Josh Shapiro, which is, for some people who are in education, he's quite friendly to charter schools, for example, which is on the one hand a big deal in Pennsylvania, but problematic for other kinds of reasons relative to public education. So that's a whole nother set of issues that and he's only just started. So that the Pennsylvania thing is a little difficult there. And so then other alternatives have come up. Jeff Waltz in Minnesota. Let's see. Well, anyway, the point being is that actually Pete Buttigieg has moved to the top of the list in some polling, and it's interesting which polling has been used, but it's kind of construed in strange ways, because they're trying to figure. You can see that some of them are biased towards trying to figure out who's going to be the best running mate for Kamala Harris in primarily in red states. And so that's that is to hold any kind of Democratic losses, and that it's good for the ticket. And you see a variety of other subcategories that are important. So it's interesting to follow the polling, and particularly the pre-withdrawal Biden polling, because then you sort of take out the negative stuff that they were just unhappy with Biden, and then look at sort of the policy issues, and it's still the economy stupid, and reproductive rights at the top of the list, and then it goes down to gun control and a variety of other things. But it's pretty clear what your quote unquote average Democrat really wants, and in terms of a ticket. I think they're and thankfully, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama have sort of weighed in together, which was also a thing to head off all the very small number of people who want Michelle Obama. They always want her to run, and she's never been interested. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. So that's been an issue. There's been this other sort of side current about trying to get rid of the Republicans dumping J.D. Vance. Now they're going to have to do it in a way that works properly, but it's going to be hard to do it. I think they doubled down, and I think they're sort of stuck there, and of course that's it's going to be a problem. They'll win the red states, they will suffer in the blue states, and then it's the swing states that will be the issue, and then of course the margins in so-called purple states. That's the thing. In terms of Roy Cooper in North Carolina, North Carolina is designed in such a way that the lieutenant governor takes over whenever the governor is out of the state. And having been reminded of how in California, when Jerry Brown went out of the state, Mike Kerb decided he would do stupid stuff whenever Jerry just crossed the border. So that could happen. And since the lieutenant governor, Robinson, I think, in North Carolina is running for governor, and he has some very crazy ideas. Strange things can happen. Let's put it that way.
Oh, and we've got flow.
All right. Fill that jar.
1.5
Is it a
liters
good?
so far.
It is. Is it a good color?
Beautiful.
You think? All righty.
Let's see. One down.
Nice. So what method do you sterilize your jars? You steam them?
I boil. I have these gigantic pots underneath the cutting board here, and I just give them a bath and then set them off to dry afterwards. And then
here we go.
If I'm doing jams, then I'll fill the jars and then throw them back in the bath for a little bit to take out the air.
Yeah, everyone should have their own auto.
I don't think we're going to get much more. Let's see. Wait.
You don't have to skim off that.
Reduced more than a half.
Uh-huh.
Let it go a little bit longer, and then I'll stir it around and see what more we can get.
I suppose the rest would be good for a compost pile or not? The residual?
Sure.
Or can you use that remainder for something?
One year I made fruit leather out of the leftovers. Maybe not the best. It's a little chewy, but the stems and all. But yeah, if you're making blueberry or raspberry, be a little bit easier. But you just stuck with the seed. Basically, you're just stuck with the seeds and the stems. You know, like back in the day, stems and seeds.
Yes.
Not sure if I can pick up any smell of the meadowsweet, meadwort. That was quicker than I thought. What was that, about 20 minutes? Half hour?
Yeah. Not bad. Of course, you're using your massive,
Yeah,
burner.
that has a little bit to do with it.
There's no problem with that scum on the top, is there? In terms of
It's not really, it's just bubbles from falling in there.
okay.
It's not like the berry scum that you get when you're cooking jam.
Okay.
Should go away. You got more Trump?
Well, I mean, I can keep yammering about
Mm.
Trump, but I think the reality is the polling is better for Harris than it was for Biden. So, and in what is it, the Ipsos poll, she's up by anywhere from 2 to 5%. So it depends on the model being used, and if you aggregate some of the stuff, it's generally better than Biden versus Trump. So that's a good thing, and it's trending upwards as opposed to But the problem, of course, is that um, Harris is trailing in all the swing states. So, I mean, one poll has her ahead, but some of these are just, there's skew involved. So we're not going to know anything for another probably a month to really see what's going on. There'll be
What do
some
you
settling.
what do you think about these right-wing nut jobs in Silicon Valley getting behind Trump so quickly? I mean, considering
Well,
how much of a corporate Democrat she'll be
Well,
is.
she's not that much of a corporate Democrat, I guess, from a venture capital point of view. I don't think she's sucked up to Silicon Valley as much as, well, like Ro Khanna, for example.
Hmm.
But I mean, she did. There was a couple of pieces of legislation, I think, and that she acted on as Attorney General. But for the most part, she's been generally neutral on these matters and not as punitive as she could have been with respect to Silicon Valley. I think the obverse is more true. That is, if you recall, Andrew Yang's running for the presidency or the nomination. There's just a lot more agitation or chatter, but the reality is that that it's not very solid support. I mean, tech bro kind of discourse, and it does veer to the right, for all the kind of bizarre reasons. There's an entire right-wing libertarian discourse that verges on all kinds of strange theories, eugenics and racism and conspiracy theory and other stuff, but most of that exhibits itself, sort of online. It's like if you read too much 4chan or 8chan or, Reddit or something, you get annoyed. But the
Those
reality
are
is,
all our berries with the meadowsweet or
there we
meadwort.
go.
So it's quite dry, so most of it's gone away, and it's just the berry mass left. So we're not really going to get much more.
The slugs will take care of the rest.
Yes.
Yeah, berry prices are crazy in the United States. They're
Got them
still
coming
red
out our
hot.
ears here.
There's nothing's cheap, and even if it's cheap, it's likely it's from not in the United States. It's I think nectarines come from Latin America or Mexico, just like avocados and mangoes, etc., are still pretty pricey.
you have an update on Ukraine, or did I miss that?
No, you didn't miss it. Let me yammer for a couple seconds on Ukraine. Ukraine is still, those poor Russians are losing troops at a massive rate. The ratio between, in terms of killed in action, between Russians and Ukrainians is probably 2-to-1, something like 2 or 3-to-1. It depends, and because no one is coming up with really accurate figures, but the more accurate figures, Russians have lost a lot of people and losing somewhere between 900 and it dipped below 1,000 for probably the first time in a couple of days, and so that's happening. More drones, new drones, discussions of those kinds of things. Nothing big has sunk recently. No big airplanes have been knocked down yet, although there was maybe I mentioned this last week. I don't know if it occurred after that. There was a challenge by a Russian Su-27 of a British surveillance flight over the Black Sea, and so it was being escorted by a couple of Tornado jets. So it was pretty meek in that sense. It would have been an interesting air-to-air battle, but clearly it was just about harassing people. They probably weren't thinking about the escorts, and it was only one Russian fighter. But the fact is, those challenges have occurred, and the Russians have, in the past, knocked down at least one unmanned drone, an American unmanned drone. So stupid stuff is happening all across the area. Most missiles are coming from the south end of the Azov, the Sea of Azov, and it appears that all traffic in the Sea of Azov is pretty neutral. There's an attack close to the Kerch Bridge, not at the Kerch Bridge, but close to it this past week. A couple of missiles, and so I think that makes the Russians nervous. I think they finally put out of commission a ferry. It's a rail ferry. It takes railway cars across. I think the Russians are nervous about running rail traffic across the Kerch Bridge, but it's unclear whether there is any large or small traffic going across there. The Kerch Bridge hasn't been hit at all, and there's no suggestion that it will or should be quite yet. I think when it does get hit, it'll signal a kind of major something or other. In the case of the Russians, Crimea is still under attack. I mean, they've hit a couple more. I think it was an S-300 air defense system was taken out. A couple of other strange things have been seen. Strange vehicles and modifications. I put up something the other night about how they managed to, one of their multiple launch missile systems, if you put a little, there's a certain covering that you can make to disguise it as a truck. So it's sort of interesting how they, both sides are very much concerned with camouflage and decoys. And yes, both sides use decoys. I think the Ukrainians are a little better at it than the Russians, but you're trying to fool a variety of aircraft. The Ukrainians have taken out this past week yet another Su-25 tactical fighter bomber. Whether it's just bad tactical stuff or they just have better missile systems, whatever, it generally is in the same region of the front. So whatever it is, they've lost for the last month about one a week, maybe one every 2 weeks. Doesn't mean that much in the sense that they've got probably 50 to 100 more of them. But the fact is that Ukrainian fighters are not being lost at the same rate, but then again, they don't have quite as many. And yes, they're still yammering about whether F-16s are going to be properly transferred or not. I think they're probably ready to go. They're just not talking about, where they are, where they're based, what's going to happen. More being transferred, or there's plans to do that. as I mentioned last week, there was transfers of a variety of other things, including modified Leopard tanks, and there's been very little commentary on whether more Abrams tanks are going to be transferred. There's a lot of things that's probably going on that we just don't know. The ISW, that the Institute for the Study of War, is mainly concerned. They can't get that much, or they're not getting much information from Ukrainians, so all they put out is Russian information. They don't do secret or confidential or classified information, so you get these kind of fragmentary reports on that the Russians are clamping down on internal stuff, trying to solidify that sort of those sort of things. The conscription of Russian troops is still going on. They have 500,000 troops dedicated to the Ukrainian war, and it's not quite the same number on the Ukrainian side, but they never talk about how many numbers they do have. But one would assume that it's relatively the same. That's a heck of a lot of soldiers on a wide front, and there was discussion, and it's not clear whether groups of 30 to 40,000 were increased. It depends where they were too. So there have been these periodic attacks on various places, and there's always reports saying that the Russians gained ground. Well, they didn't really gain that much ground, and when you look at, I put up an overlay that overlaid 2022, 2023, and 2024, where the line had changed, and it changed very, very little. It looks like there's nothing happening. It's quite, and some people will argue from such a map that nothing is happening. Well, no, the fact is 1,000 people are getting, killed or wounded, or 2,000 every day. So it's stuff's going on. It just and civilians are being killed as well. They did, as I've mentioned before, that children's hospital was hit 2 weeks ago, and the thing is that the death rate for civilians is nowhere near that of Israel Gaza. So if you're just keeping track of this, it's just by comparison, Israel Gaza civilian deaths it's just crazy by comparison. The Ukrainians, despite the fact that the Russians do go for civilian targets, they're clearly not killing quite as many people, and that's interesting but problematic as one can imagine. Still problematic. There's a lot of stuff going on in Belarus that nobody wants to talk about, and that's sort of interesting. That's one thing. The Poles are doing whatever they're doing. It is that they I think they're trying to be very careful about what they're preparing for, and that's all these sort of exercises about how to isolate Kaliningrad. That's part of, I assume it's part of the normal strategy. Let's see, this past week I showed sort of rivet joint, that is U.S. Surveillance along the northern part of the Baltic, which it's just interesting to see how they run their surveillance all the way up and down. They run it, I think, once a week or more. A surveillance ISR flight up and down Finland, and it comes in over. I think they're based in England, so they just come across, sweep across over Denmark, and then come up through the Baltics, and then up to the top of Finland, and then come back down. And there's a tremendous amount of traffic of all of these things flying around up there. There are a couple of new reconnaissance drones being brought up. They talked a little bit more about how they've modified a very small, they're called ultralight aircraft, but I'm not sure that that's the definition. They are smaller airplanes with smaller engines. It's kind of a miniaturized Cessna or whatever, civilian plane. But those are the ones that have been modified by the Ukrainians. These are Ukrainian designs for those long-range missions where they're flying, 600 or 700 miles into the Russian interior and then hitting a refinery or a tank farm or something. So that's kind of what's happening on the Ukraine-Russian front. you know, it's a tough summer. That's all. It's very warm. People are, you know, there's stuff's going on. The demining effort is going fairly well. There's some maps of um, demining stuff, and it's very odd that the sort of data on demining came out at the same time. The Russians decided to attack the NGO that does demining. It's sort of weird to see it happen at the same time, and there are no coincidences in war, I suppose. So that's going on. More training is going on. The French are doing training. The Brits continue. They have trained 10,000 troops so far. There is something going on in Romania, not quite clear. For some reason, the Russians overflew 3 drones past Ukraine, and which landed in Romania, and the Romanians are a little pissed off about that, and so that's happening. It's one of the times that these things happen. You know, you launch 30 of them, and a couple of them just get loose. That's been happening. The Poles proclaimed they were going to knock them down if it happened. I think the Romanians made a claim about it, but I'm not sure they have the air defense to do that. Let's see what else. There's been some attention to the shadow fleet of oil tankers that the Russians are using, a considerable number of them. A lot of them are rebadged Greek. I don't know if they're single or double hull tankers. So they're running around, and there's been some effort to try and identify them, but it's not clear whether they, at the real classified level, whether they're actually keeping track of them. And I'm quite sure that they are, considering, how they keep track of pretty much everything that's going on in the Black Sea. So that's happening. There haven't been any real embarrassing ones where they've flown a drone into Moscow yet. Again, whatever. It hasn't quite happened yet, but I think they save these kinds of attacks for, because it's not like it's a huge attack. It's just simply that it's more terrorist attack in that sense, that it simply reminds the Russians that the Ukrainians can actually reach out and do crazy stuff. There's more HIMARS applications, not so many ATACMS, because they don't have a lot of them. I mean, the advanced, missile systems. So it is a weird little balance of sort of activity. And it is problematic to see that the advanced cruise missiles that the Russians are using use a tremendous amount of Western technology, chips, et cetera, in their guidance systems, et cetera, that they've taken the Ukrainians have taken the wreckage and pulled them apart and shown how much over the counter or Western electronics are being used, and that's the symbol of the problem, that the sanctions regime hasn't really quite controlled proliferation of those kinds of things. So anyway, that's kind of our Ukraine report, and as we look at red currant mash.
Yeah,
As we sort of mentioned, maybe I did or go ahead.
I think that's about all we got left. So just a tiny little bit.
Are you you're gonna save that?
Yeah. So I need
like
to
enough, right?
drain that.
Filter it.
We just can't get it out our little on our little tube because of the angle here. So I gotta play around with it. Yeah. As an aging man, I'm finding this instrument quite interesting. This could come in handy in some other places.
You know what it was used for before? Yes, it had other cultural uses. Darn roach clips. Anyway, yes. Standard chemistry set.
I was thinking more in the urinary tract department.
Oh yes, indeed. That's right. Your bidet uses hose clamps.
Oh goodness! Whatever. It looks like we got more than a liter, 2.5 liters.
There we go.
Just barely.
Excellent. Well, you use it as a cordial too, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
put it in that little thing, it'll
Yeah.
be used fairly quickly. Well, we're getting close to the end here. Uh, there's going to be Twilight Zone tonight. I don't know if John wants to talk about that a little. John? I don't know if John,
All done.
Prof. John is going to, what?
We got a bucket of mash. Couple liters of cordial or syrup. Not really syrup. Juice. Red currant juice. Red currant juice.
Well, you could be real crazy
and meadowsweet or meadowwort. Sorry, Nancy, I don't know the Latin for it. I forgot. Struggling to remember its general names or popular names. What are those names called?
Common.
Common name.
Anyway, Twilight Zone in half an hour. At 11 o'clock tonight, if you're still awake, is The Prisoner. I'm not quite sure what else is on the schedule. We're going to have other things this weekend, including Weekly Marks tomorrow. And we're going to be watching, as John mentioned earlier, if you were with us, we're going to be looking at the Star Trek movies. That is the first set of Star. I'm just not in with the system of categorization, but I'm sure there's a technical term that defines the first set of of Star Trek movies versus the second set of Star Wars, or I mean Star Trek movies, and then the more recent versions of that. And yes, I'm not that much of a connoisseur. I like watching them, and I keep track of a certain set of things, but I either don't have the means or ability to watch the Star Trek more recent series, which I'd really like to see sometime, but I'm sure at some moment I'll get a chance to I binge those kinds of things for myself. I mean, I'm curious about them simply because it's the CGI has gotten so much better, and it's kind of nice to look at fairly well developed, even television related CGI. So that's just me and that.
Yes, and we'll be getting to those by the mid-century, I would think.
John, I'm in no rush personally. Just feel free to take your time.
Okay. Yeah, we'll work our way through the first 700 episodes of Star Trek, and then get into the new stuff. Yeah, just most people just refer to the first 6 movies as the original cast movies, and then the other 4, what is it, 4 Next Generation films.
Yes.
Yeah.
Related ones.
Yeah.
Right. Insurrection is one. I can't remember the other ones.
Yeah.
Anyway.
First Contact.
Generations.
Generations. Yeah.
Generations overlaps.
That's right. There were a few original cast members in Generations, and the Next Generation cast. It was 2 different time frames merging together.
Darn those years.
Yes. So the first
known as movies to avoid.
No, quite the opposite, Lane. We've watched the first 2 together. We watched Star Trek: The Motion Picture and The Wrath of Khan.
Search for Spock is number 3, right?
Search for Spock is next. Yes, because you may remember the end of the Wrath of Khan. Mr. Spock sacrifices himself to save the crew and the Enterprise. So we'll have to see what happens after that in Star Trek 3.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
It's not another moment where he makes a logical decision, but it could be seen as emotional.
Indeed.
Mm,
If only he showed emotion, John. It
I
wasn't so
know.
logical.
Well, it raises
All right.
some other interesting questions about what counts as Vulcan friendship. I mean, how is
Got a loose definition of interest in there, only. That's like very subjective. Jesus.
Well, from the beginning, they say, very early in the original series, they say that Vulcans tend to be loyal, which I don't know that that's necessarily logical. But it is said, well, at least it's said of Spock. So I don't know if they're applying that to all Vulcans, but
There were 2 Avro Vulcans which did simulated nuclear attacks on America in the 60s, and 1 simulated, of course.
yes,
Had they been real, we would have had no Star Trek. Imagine that.
that would have been a
Vulcans-
crime against the universe, Lane.
Vulcans taking out the Vulcans.
On British aircraft.
All right,
Beautiful.
Ann. Why don't you close us out while I run upstairs to the production room to get the closing credits before these fellas get in fisticuffs.
Oh God. Yes, well, slap fights in the next half hour. Anyway, yeah, Twilight Zone very soon, in less than half an hour, 22 minutes until Twilight Zone. Other matters coming up. Yeah, we're some of us are attending the class unity thing on Sunday afternoons. After which we'll be at 5 o'clock on Sunday. We'll watch the 3rd Star Trek movie, full-length feature. Let's see what other matters are coming. Go ahead.
I just want to say that guest stars Christopher Lloyd, which you wouldn't expect in Star Trek, probably, but nonetheless,
I used to like it.
That's true. That's true. Christopher Lloyd is found in the strangest places. He has quite an herb, as they say, needless to say. Probably the most widely known ones are, of course, the Back to the Future trilogy or whatever.
yeah.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes, yeah.
Taxi.
And of course, Taxi. That's probably where he got his fame. Yeah.
Yep.
He's like Nate in Taxi, isn't he?
He's like Nate.
Yeah, Nate was a taxi dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We should call Nate the Doc from now on. Doc.
Yes, there are moments of resemblance there.
Yes.
Well, on that note, we'll see you next week.
We'll try
Take
and
care.
do better. We really will try and do better.
Wow.